I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be like brutally honest with yourself about the answer.
Oh, coming in hot.
Right. But seriously, do you ever feel this low, persistent hum of, well, wrongness vibrating in the background of modern life?
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're going about your day, checking off your to-do list, doing all the things you are supposedly required to do, but there is this quiet, heavy exhaustion sitting just underneath it all.
Yeah, like a baseline anxiety.
Exactly. It's this creeping suspicion that our endless striving, the constant societal tension, all that buzzing anxiety we carry around, that it isn't actually for anything.
Right.
And yet, if you ever try to bring it up in casual conversation, society just pats you on the head and says, well, what do you expect? That is just the human condition.
Yeah, it's a profoundly common experience. I mean, people will often describe it as a sense of chronic friction.
Chronic friction, yeah.
You feel like you are pushing a boulder uphill every single day. Everything takes immense effort. But the promised destination of, peace or satisfaction never actually seems to arrive.
And that feeling of endless friction is exactly what brings us to today's deep dive. We are exploring a philosophical and spiritual text that basically points a finger directly at that exhaustion and says, no, that is not the human condition.
It's so validating to read.
It really is. It tells you that you are not crazy for feeling that way. What you're experiencing is an inversion.
An inversion, right?
Yeah. The text we are looking at is called Inversion Spells. Why the world is what it is, though it may not always yet be what it is meant to be.
It is such a layered, provocative text. It makes a
Yeah.
very bold claim about the actual architecture of our reality.
It completely shifted how I view the world, honestly. So our mission today is to unpack this argument.
Let's do it.
The author is suggesting that our reality isn't fundamentally broken, and we aren't just floating in random, meaningless chaos. Rather, the world is inverted, meaning it has been turned entirely against its own natural grain.
Which is a huge distinction.
Huge. And to find our way back, the text lays out a series of spells, or like structural shifts in how we think and live, to return the world to its original direction.
Right, and we should probably clarify how we're approaching this.
Oh, absolutely. To be clear right up front, we are not treating this text as absolute, unquestionable dogma today.
No, definitely not.
We are exploring it as an incredibly sharp, fascinating lens on human history, psychology, and mythology, just to see what we can learn about our own daily lives.
And it is a vital lens to look through, because before anyone can start addressing that chronic societal anxiety you mentioned, well, there needs to be an accurate diagnosis of the underlying disease.
Right, you have to know what you're treating.
Exactly. And the text goes out of its way to clarify that the problem we are facing isn't entropy.
Okay, so it's not just things falling apart.
Right. It isn't the natural decay of things degrading over time. The problem is a highly functional inversion.
Yeah, and when I first read the word inversion, I initially assumed it just meant like a system that was broken or corrupted.
Sure, that's the common assumption.
But the author is making a much more specific and frankly terrifying point here. It's not that the machine of society is broken. It's that the machine is working perfectly, but it's running entirely in reverse.
That captures it perfectly.
Yeah.
According to this framework, an inversion happens when something is turned against its own fundamental nature so completely, and, for such a long period of time, that it actually forgets its original direction.
It just forgets.
Yeah. The tragedy of an inversion is that it doesn't stop moving. It continues to function, it continues to generate activity, but it moves entirely away from its source.
And it masks its own direction. The ultimate trick of an inverted system is that it takes that wrong movement and renames it progress.
Yes, the rebranding is key.
The text uses this fantastic, simple imagery to explain it. It says an inversion is a river that was naturally meant to flow, but instead it gets dammed up, and society calls that stagnant reservoir efficient water management.
Or it takes a forest that was meant to be treated as a sacred living ecosystem,
Yeah.
turns it into a lumber yard, and calls it economic development.
Exactly.
And here is the crux of the issue for the individual, really.
Yeah.
Because this inverted, dammed up world is the only one any of us alive today were born into, we are conditioned from birth to just call it reality.
We just accept it.
We look at the stagnant reservoir and assume, Well, that's simply how water naturally exists.
It's like putting a thick wool sweater on inside out and backwards and wearing it that way for
Oh,
centuries.
that's a great analogy.
Thanks. But yeah, over generations, society eventually concludes that itchy seams rubbing against your skin and a collar choking your throat are just the realities of wearing clothes.
You don't even realize the garment can be taken off and turned around.
Exactly. You just think, clothes are itchy.
Right. And that realization that the discomfort is not mandatory, but structural, brings us to what the text calls the first spell.
Naming the inversion.
Yes. The first spell is the act of naming it out loud. It is the conscious breaking of the silent, unspoken agreement that what currently exists must be what was always meant to be.
You literally just have to say it out loud because inversions don't need a PR team to sustain themselves.
No, they really don't.
They sustain themselves simply by operating in the background, entirely unquestioned.
Right, and naming the backwards movement is the necessary first step to undoing it. But, a diagnosis demands a cure.
Yeah, obviously.
If you accept the premise that the world is moving in the wrong direction, it inevitably forces a much larger question.
Right, like if we're stuck in reverse, what does forward actually look like? If the sweater is backwards, what is the right way to wear it?
Exactly. And to answer that, the text introduces the concept of the universe's inherent grain.
Okay, the grain. Let's dig into that.
The argument is that the cosmos isn't just a dead, neutral void. It has a direction. It has a tendency.
Like wood.
Yes. Think of how wood has a natural grain you were meant to cut along, or how water has a preferred, most efficient path when running down a mountain.
And reading through the sources, it's clear this isn't like a brand new idea.
Oh, not at all.
Philosophers and spiritual traditions across the globe have been trying to put a name to this structural grain for millennia. We see it called the Tao in Chinese philosophy.
Dharma in Hinduism.
Right, Mot in ancient Egypt, the Logos in Greek thought. It's the concept of a sacred, underlying order operating beneath all the visible chaos we experience.
But the author adds a really crucial layer to this concept.
Hmm.
The text argues that this cosmological grain isn't just a cold law of physics like gravity.
It has a personality almost.
It has a specific quality.
Yeah.
At its deepest layer, the natural grain of existence is generative. It is highly receptive. It is relational. It creates, it sustains what it creates. It allows things to dissolve, and then it creates again. Across global mythologies and traditions, this specific quality, knowing through being rather than through doing, has historically been recognized as the primordial feminine principle.
Okay, so I have to admit, when I first read the phrase primordial feminine principle, my modern political defenses immediately went up.
That is a very normal reaction.
I found myself thinking, wait, are we really just mapping modern human gender wars onto the cosmos? Because to a modern ear, that sounds like a purely social argument about men and women. So how does the author avoid that trap?
Well, the text explicitly separates the cosmological principle from constructed human gender roles. It is a vital distinction.
So it's not about gender.
No, the author's not talking about pink versus blue or behavioral expectations for men and women in society. The text is describing a structural cosmological reality, the principle of holding space, birthing, and sustaining. It is a way of existing that applies to everything in the universe, from the way a star forms in a nebula, to how a seed germinates in soil, to how an idea takes root in the mind.
Okay, that makes so much more sense. It's structural, not social. And the core argument is that modern human society runs violently against this receptive, generative grain.
We push against it constantly.
We prioritize extracting over sustaining. We prioritize doing over being.
And when you run a system against its natural grain, what happens?
You get friction, enormous amounts of heat and noise.
Exactly. When we look at modern society running so frantically against the natural receptive grain of the cosmos, the sheer friction it generates looks, from the outside, like vitality.
It looks like we're being productive.
It looks like things are happening, but it's actually just the engine of society overheating.
And we didn't just accept that overheating, we rebranded it.
We sure did.
We took the heat of that friction and renamed it ambition. We took the deafening noise and renamed it progress.
Yeah.
And that low, persistent hum of wrongness you feel in your chest, we just slapped a label on it called the human condition.
Peeling back those labels is the second spell. It requires naming the grain out loud.
Okay, so the first spell names the inversion, the second spell names the grain.
Right. It is the deep recognition that existence naturally tends toward wholeness and relationality. The text wants the reader to understand that this isn't just a nice poetic aspiration you read on a motivational poster.
It's not just a nice idea.
No, it is the structural reality of the universe.
But, the terrifying part of reading this text is the realization that this wasn't an accident. We didn't just stumble into this inverted state by mistake.
That was very deliberate.
The text argues that this primordial feminine principle was deliberately covered up and subordinated to build the world we live in now.
The inversion happened through highly specific historical and mythological choices. Ancient societies deliberately built systems, laws, and religious structures that replaced the concept of a primordial mother with the concept of a paternal absolute.
This brings us to the third spell, which is the act of naming what was covered up.
Yes, lifting the veil.
The author emphasizes that in early human history, the sacred feminine wasn't viewed as just a soft complement to a harder masculine spiritual center. She wasn't like an accessory.
Not at all.
She was the absolute ground zero of origin.
And the historical examples provided in the sources are really undeniable. If you look at ancient Sumer, arguably the cradle of human civilization, you find Namu.
Right.
Namu was the primordial sea who preceded all the other gods. She wasn't a lesser deity, she was the literal substance from which everything else emerged.
Or look at the traditions of India.
Yes.
The concept of Shakti isn't just a decorative add-on to Shiva. Shakti is the active energy that makes Shiva capable of being anything at all. She is the literal condition of possibility.
Exactly. And we see the exact same structure in Celtic traditions, where the concept of sovereignty itself was entirely feminine.
The land was a goddess.
The land was understood as a goddess, and no king could legitimately rule without her direct consent and partnership.
Wow.
And in the Yoruba tradition, the Orisha Ocean governs the sweet primordial waters. The myth makes it perfectly clear that without her active agreement and participation, no active creation by any other god can hold together.
This is the piece that really snapped everything into place for me. I had this massive aha moment reading these sources.
It really changes your perspective.
Because these aren't just decorative myths. They aren't just old bedtime stories people told around a fire. They are structural cosmologies. They are blueprints for how human beings understood their relationship to reality.
The mythology of a culture dictates the psychology and the laws of that culture.
Yes. When a society fundamentally believes the universe was birthed by a primordial mother, like Namu or ocean, the Earth is viewed as a living relative.
Right.
It is an entity you have to negotiate with. But when the mythology shifts, when the story changes to a sky father who builds the world from the top down, out of dead, inert matter, the Earth is suddenly viewed as a warehouse.
A giant storage unit.
Exactly. It becomes a storage unit of raw materials meant to be extracted. That mythological shift is what legally and morally justified deforestation, industrial extraction, and the conquest of nature centuries later.
You are describing the shift from participation to domination. And the third spell is the act of holding onto what could not be entirely erased.
The remaining pieces.
Right. The architects of the inversion paved over that primordial ground. But the ground itself is still there, just waiting beneath the concrete.
And once you actually see the sheer scale of this inversion and the historical theft of it, it usually triggers a pretty intense emotional response.
Oh, definitely. Anger, grief, denial.
And navigating that reaction is the focus of the fourth spell.
When people first grasp the depth of the inversion, they almost always default to one of two extreme failing strategies. And the text insists we have to forge a middle way between them.
Because both extremes are traps. The first trap is what the text calls the spell of pure grief. If you focus exclusively on the wound, only on what was lost, suppressed, or distorted by history, you end up perpetually victimizing the sacred feminine. You define the principle entirely by what was done to it.
And the tragic irony of pure grief is that it keeps the feminine trapped inside the exact same patriarchal frame.
Yeah, that's wild.
It just reverses the emotional charge. You are still defining the feminine as fundamentally powerless.
You're just changing the polarity, but you are still stuck in the exact same battery.
Great way to put it.
But the second trap is equally dangerous. The author calls it the spell of pure transcendence.
Ah, yes.
This is the classic spiritual bypassing we see so much in modern wellness culture. The attitude that says, well, the physical world doesn't really matter, all is one. Human suffering is just an illusion of the ego.
It is an attempt to just float above the damage.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of an analogy for this because it honestly infuriates me.
Let's hear it.
Pure transcendence is like building a massive, shiny skyscraper directly over a sinkhole and pretending the foundation is totally fine just because the penthouse has a really nice view.
Oh, that's perfect.
You are ignoring the very real, specific historical harm that created the sinkhole. You cannot simply bypass the physical body, and you cannot bypass human history.
You really can't. The middle way demands that we hold both realities simultaneously. It forces us to acknowledge that the historical harm is very real and the suppression has devastating modern consequences.
Right.
But also, it recognizes that the foundational ground, the cosmological grain, is intact and cannot be erased.
And this duality brings us to the actual title of the text. The world is not yet what it is meant to be. I wanted to talk about the profound weight of that word, yet.
Yet is the anchor of this entire philosophy. It is crucial to understand that yet is not blind optimism.
It isn't just crossing your fingers.
No, it's not burying your head in the sand and hoping things magically get better.
It is structural knowledge. It's knowing the direction of the grain. If you fundamentally understand that the universe naturally tends toward wholeness, receptivity, and relationality, then you know that a society running violently against that grain simply cannot be sustained forever.
The engine will eventually stall.
So returning to the natural grain isn't just a naive hope, it is a structural inevitability. Yet is the quiet, unshakable knowledge of that return.
It really is.
For anyone listening who feels completely overwhelmed by the chaotic state of the world right now, I think adopting the power of yet is incredibly grounding.
It gives you a solid place to stand while the world spins. But standing there isn't the end of the process.
Right, there's work to do.
If we are committed to walking this middle way, we have to talk about action. What does the actual work of turning back toward the grain look like in our daily lives?
Like, how do we actually uncast the inversion?
That is the fifth spell. The foundational rule here is that because the inversion is layered into absolutely everything, I mean, it's baked into our legal systems, our modern medicine, our global economy, the reversal must also be deeply plural and layered.
There is no single magical incantation that fixes it all.
No silver bullet.
And it's not going to be a sudden, violent, chaotic revolution either. The text compares the uncasting to the Earth turning in space. It is a slow, steady, inevitable rotation from one face of itself to another.
The work has to happen across multiple planes simultaneously. There's the philosophical layer, which involves dismantling the logic of domination in our institutions.
Right.
There's the mythological layer, which is the work of returning to those buried stories of Oshun and Namu to reclaim structural knowledge.
Yeah.
But the layer that demands the most immediate personal attention is the somatic layer, the physical body.
This was the most challenging part of the deep dive for me. The text argues that the somatic layer is where the inversion has done its quietest, most devastating, and most thorough work on all of us.
We have been conditioned over decades of modern life to chronically contract our nervous system.
Tense.
Exactly. We are bombarded by screens, artificial urgency, and chronic stress. To survive the sheer velocity and friction of an inverted world, the human body learns to contract against feeling.
It's a defense mechanism.
We shut down our receptivity. We ignore the deep intuitive intelligence of our own physical bodies just to get through the workday.
And the phrase the author uses here stopped me in my tracks. They write that unlearning this physical contraction happens at the pace of tissue.
The pace of tissue.
We are so used to wanting everything to be an instant software update. We want a life hack. But the body doesn't run on code. It runs on biology.
You cannot rush tissue healing.
You have to slowly, patiently teach your nervous system over months and years that it is actually safe to drop the armor and return to a state of receptivity.
And as that somatic shift happens on an individual level, it begins to ripple outward into the structures of society, which is what the sixth spell addresses.
It scales up.
Right. As we heal our bodies, we naturally begin to redefine our core societal values to align with the cosmic grain.
We start to view care completely differently. In our current inverted world, caregiving, whether it's raising children, tending to the elderly, or nursing the sick, is pushed into the shadows.
It's devalued.
It's treated as an invisible, private burden that keeps people away from real economic work. But in an aligned world, care is recognized as the primary work of civilization. It is the foundational labor that makes all other human endeavors possible.
Consequently, our entire definition of power transforms. The inverted world defines power as the ability to extract resources, control others, and accumulate endless wealth at the center.
The modern version of power is essentially a giant vacuum cleaner.
That's hilarious, but true.
It measures success by how much it can hoard. But the text argues that aligned power operates entirely differently. It's not a vacuum, it's a mycelial network in an old-growth forest.
A completely different structure.
A mycelial network measures its power by how efficiently it can distribute nutrients, water, and information to keep the entire ecosystem thriving. True power is deeply rooted, and it participates in a massive, generous web of exchange.
That is the absolute essence of the generative grain.
But let me push back on this for a second.
Go for it.
Because if I'm playing devil's advocate, someone listening might say, well, if we align with this generative, receptive, deeply caring grain, doesn't that just create a passive, fragile, overly soft utopia? Doesn't this whole philosophy completely ignore the harsh, brutal, often violent realities of nature?
It is a very common defense mechanism against this philosophy, and the text confronts it head-on. An aligned world rooted in the sacred feminine is not entirely soft.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, the primordial feminine includes razor-sharp edges, profound darkness, and fierce, uncompromising power. The author brings in very specific mythological examples to prove that this cosmology does not shy away from the dark.
It points to the K-Leech, right?
Yes.
The ancient Celtic hag goddess who holds absolute, terrifying sovereignty over the bitter cold and harshness of winter.
Exactly. And Morgan Le Fay of Arthurian legend, who fiercely refuses to simply be categorized or made into an enemy by a patriarchal order.
And the Morrigan, the Celtic goddess of war, fate, and sovereignty, who unflinchingly oversees battlefield deaths and violent endings. The primordial feminine is not just a gentle, accommodating Earth mother making sure everyone is comfortable.
Right. She's not a maid.
She holds the fierce, destructive, and terrible aspects of existence as well.
Exactly. So a world in alignment with this principle isn't some sanitized utopia without death or loss or the grueling hard work of transformation. The difference is that it holds those dark elements as sacred, necessary parts of a larger cycle. It doesn't view them as errors in the system.
It doesn't view winter as a failure of summer.
I love that.
It views winter as a necessary part of the grain. It's just honest about what existence actually requires. It honors the decay as much as the bloom.
And embracing that total cycle brings us to the end of our journey and what the text calls the seventh spell.
The seventh spell essentially closes the circle. It brings us back to where we started this entire conversation, but with a fundamentally transformed understanding of reality.
The spell acknowledges the truth. The world is what it is. An inversion occurred historically, it was sustained economically and legally, and it was taught to all of us as the natural order.
We accepted the backwards sweater.
Right, but beneath what it is, operating quietly and eternally in the background, the world is what it is meant to be.
The distance between those two realities, the frantic, inverted world we navigate every day, and the deeply relational, meant-to-be world, that distance is exactly where our daily work lives.
That is the space held open by the power of the word yet.
The profound comfort here is that the meantness of the world is already established. We don't have to invent a new utopia from scratch.
We simply have to stop moving against the grain. We just have to turn.
Just turn. It sounds so elegantly simple, but as we've explored today, it requires undoing centuries of wearing an inside-out sweater.
It's a lot of undoing.
It requires dismantling the myths of domination, and most intimately, it requires healing the nervous system. And that brings me right back to that low hum of wrongness, that exhaustion we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Yes, coming full circle.
If this text is right, that hum isn't a permanent life sentence. It isn't your destiny. It's just friction. It is simply the sound of your own body running against its natural grain.
And easing that friction cannot happen overnight. As the text notes, it starts small and it starts somatically.
Because healing moves at the pace of tissue.
At the pace of tissue.
So as you go about your week, navigating the noise and the artificial urgency of the modern world, I want to leave you with a specific thought to mull over. Ask yourself, what is one small, tangible area in your own life where you can stop striving against your own grain today?
Just one small area.
Where can you drop the armor, release the contraction in your shoulders, and simply allow yourself to be receptive?
It is a profoundly difficult but necessary question to sit with.
Try taking off the backwards sweater, even just for 10 minutes today. See how the air feels on your skin. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.